All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. We're spending time at the 2025 AHR Expo, and we're focusing on a lot of new products, particularly in the cold climate heat pump range and just heat pumps in general. So we're hanging out with Johnson Controls. Would you both mind introducing yourself to the public?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Piero Caballero. I am one of the product managers specializing on residential products that we sell here in North America.
Okay.
My name is Samuel Vivar. I am the Ductless split light commercial residential product manager for Johnson Controls Hitachi.
So we're really representing a combination of ducted systems as well as ductless systems, and you've both seen significant transitions within our industries. So we can probably bounce back and forth talking about things that we've witnessed. Let's talk about like the performance that we have noticed in, like, say, the last 10 years. You know, spending most of my career in the industry, I've seen that evolution of performance, but in the last couple of years, we've really seen a change in capabilities. You know, there was a time in the Midwest when we looked at a heat pump balance point, and very often in the 40s. And so when we looked at from either a energy efficiency balance point or as a comfort balance point, somewhere in that realm, our heat pumps just weren't performing enough. We go back to either our electric resistive heat for supplementary, or we transition over to fossil fuel. But in today's industry, especially in like that ducted sector, that is not the case at all. So what are we seeing for performance in our ducted products particularly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, you're 100% right. We're seeing this trend, especially in the last 5 years, 10 years, where heat pumps specifically are becoming way more efficient in colder climates,
yes,
especially extreme colder climates. You can see the DOE Cold Climate Challenge is something that was brought to us a couple years ago, and being part of that was great. But you can kind of sense, right, that that's where the industry is headed.
It is.
Heat pumps are becoming more efficient in those colder climates. We have a product that right now it's in development, and it's going to be able to provide 100% heating capacity at negative 24 Fahrenheit.
What?
So that's an impressive number. So we are working towards that.
Okay.
Still in development, so it's not
Sure,
something that we can talk about much of it. But
yeah,
I would say that's the future. Eventually, I mean, furnaces are still around, and we still need furnaces because that's a great way of heating our homes. But we feel like in the future, maybe 5-10 years down the road, their heat pumps are going to start taking over slowly.
Absolutely.
We still have dual fuel systems, but eventually we're going to see more heat pumps being adopted.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that dual fuel because I've really got some good pointers on that here in just a minute. So Samuel, like when we talk about ductless systems, that's really been it's been a common component within the United States that people have seen, but they've never truly understood, right? They might see them in single applications. They might see them on additions to homes, never truly understood the capabilities of ductless systems. But in today's environment, we can have a ductless system that can actually cover the entire load of a home on the multi-port systems if we have, a smaller amount of rooms in that structure. But the performance as well has kind of went down a similar path, where if we looked at ductless systems from 10 years ago, there's nothing like the ductless that's coming out today. And some of our ductless systems are even superiorly outperforming even some of the ductless or the ducted products, because now we can control that air very well. So let's talk about some of those transitions in the ductless realm.
So yes, thank you. That's a great point. Starting from, let's say we came here to North America, like Canada regions, in 2015, and you're absolutely right. Starting from there, I think most of the Hitachi product, specifically focusing on Hitachi in this case from the ductless side, the operation temperatures were just not quite there, right? I think transitioning into this market, we realized, this market heavily demands cold climate regions, especially North America, especially Canada. You're talking temperatures down to minus 20 F, minus 25 F, you name it, right? So what we did is we've completely redesigned the line card throughout the years to where you've improved the heat exchangers, you've improved the compressors, you've added additional accumulators, bigger accumulators.
Right.
We've completely improved compressor ratios, pipe links, all that stuff to maximize operating temperature as well as keeping the systems from non-derating.
Okay.
So ultimately, we have products as of today that can go operate down to minus 22 F, and you're still keeping excellent heating capacity, 70%. Roughly, you name it, at those temperatures. And this is product that we have available as of
right now. Wow.
Correct.
So we've seen in both ducted and ductless systems incredibly significant differences in the heating capability at these very negative temperatures. I know for myself, I challenged myself to experiment with some high-performing heat pumps. So I actually have gas in my home, in the primary home, but in my garage, in my studio, and in my wood shop, I have a multi-port ductless. And I did a video last winter to try to show how comfortable it can be. It was 5 degrees below zero, and I'm in my wood shop in shorts, and it's 80 degrees, and I'm running solely on a ductless heating system, a ductless heat pump at -5, and it was incredibly comfortable. So that has definitely confirmed to me that the changes that we've made and how comfortable we can be with ducted and ductless solutions. On those ducted ones, I have a really, really, really good perspective on that dual fuel. You'd mentioned dual fuel, and we have a lot of customers, especially in the Midwest, that are not ready to go to heat pumps just yet. And so when we look at a solution of a heat pump that is combined with a dual fuel application, with a gas backup, it helps ease that customer's transition into a heat pump world. So one of the contractors that I talked with earlier, he said he uses that strategy for customers that may have a bad taste in their mouth from a heat pump from the 1970s or 80s and even 90s that just didn't really do a great job. And so we're starting to see that application of a high-performing heat pump along with that dual fuel application with fossil fuel. Do you still see that as a pretty significant product lineup?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've optimized, I would say, 80% of our heat pumps to work very well with our furnaces. I mean, we have some of the best in-class furnaces we have today with our brands, but oftentimes in the past they weren't optimized to work with our heat pumps.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
now we are designing them, making sure the airflows are designed to match the airflows of our furnaces, the blowers inside of furnaces, and we're making them as compatible as possible, making them easier to install and easier to wire, and making sure that the system is seamless installation, and that people understand that it's going to depend a lot on the economics, right? Because sometimes gas is going to be cheaper depending on the region, or electricity could be cheaper. So you get the best of both worlds.
You can balance
and
that.
You can balance that. You can choose where you want to transition from the heat pump to the furnace and vice versa. So I think that's one of the big competitive advantages, or making sure you have a full system.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. So I myself would like to go straight electric, straight heat pump, but I'm also aware that there are times where we may have a wind chill factor. We had a -30 wind chill only for a couple of nights, and in those nights I could get a little uncomfortable with just heat pump alone. It is nice to be able to have that gas as a backup.
Correct.
But I do prefer using my heat pump for a primary heating source. Now, we're going through a transition in almost all equipment. Residential and light commercial is going to be impacted by our refrigerant transition first. We'll see it in VRF and commercial products as we go along. Now, in the ducted and in the ductless, we're going to be making refrigerant transitions into A2Ls, and even like that hybrid system, we're going to be introducing refrigerant detection sensors in a lot of applications. I would say most applications. How have you seen the A2L refrigerants impact ducted systems?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, right, we just went through the transitions. We've had products being introduced in the market since last year.
Okay.
So we're one of the first few OEMs that had A2L refrigerants in the market, at least in the ducted side.
Sure.
So we've had a product for a while, so we're getting a lot of feedback from customers, even though they're still doing a lot of 410A.
Yes.
The transition has been slower than what we expected.
Yeah.
But we're getting great feedback. I mean, we have the product that's rarely available. Customers understand the differences between the two. Even though if you're an installer, if you're doing the best practices with 410A, little is going to change when you transition to 454B. So just making sure that your equipment is rated for the new refrigerant. But other than that, I mean, the changes, yes, units are now A2L. We have the new sensor embedded in all of our products.
Okay.
All of our coils come with a refrigerant detection system, and our air handlers will come with that as well, embedded in the controls. So that is a benefit. Eventually, we're going to be releasing products that are going to have that as an accessory. There will be some applications, especially with small spaces, where you won't require the refrigerant detection system, so you can lower your costs that way. So we're working on all those things, but I feel like the transition has been great. I mean, we have the product that is available, and we're pretty much coming towards the end of the transition when it comes to product offering.
Yeah, and I've noticed that, and I've seen Johnson Controls very front forward on helping contractors. We've got the refrigerant calculator, so that we're actually making it very, very simple for a contractor to look at a system and go, okay, am I going to need this in this application? Boom, here's my room, here's my size, here's my height of my ceiling, and the easy button. And that's really nice. When we look at even as an instructor trying to teach this to students, if I have any way of making an easy button in the industry, it's very helpful for the end user. And so Johnson Controls has been excellent at bringing that and the education along with using the refrigerant detection sensors and what that looks like. And you're right. It's a matter of adding a refrigerant detection sensor to a coil on a dual fuel or to the coil of the air handler.
Exactly.
And so it's not a major change, but we will see that then in all products, at least for a period of time.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. And so, Sam, when we're looking at ductless products, that brings up some interesting mixes, because we know that from like the M1 standards, there's an area in there around 4 pounds or so, depending on refrigerant, where we may not even need detection. So how is Hitachi looking at that? Because I've seen a variety of manufacturers struggle with how to address refrigerant detection in a ductless system.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first off, I'll start with, having the inverter technology and having the maximizing the efficiency and the performance has actually helped us minimize our factory charge.
Oh, yeah.
And has tremendously helped us minimize our additional charge. Which means that most of our single split products will ultimately have that 4 pound charge or less, which means that installers and contractors will never even have to worry about it.
It won't even look different.
Right, exactly.
Except for maybe a couple stickers.
So what we've also done is we've developed an R32 calculation tool just to give them that peace of mind. Even though they don't need it, they can go in there and they can just type in their, what system they're using, what's their total pipe length, what indoor unit they're using.
Sure.
And based on that, they can ultimately say, oh yeah, I am under 4 pounds. I don't need any sensors. But we realize that there is some instances where we might have to cross that 4 pound limit. So if we do end up crossing it, we have also prepared for that, especially for our light commercials and for our multi-zone products. Since those products are a little bit more longer pipe lengths, you can apply more indoor units to it. The charge ends up crossing that barrier. And because of that instance, our multi-zone indoor units all have that built-in leak sensor as well.
As every indoor coil?
On the indoor units.
Okay.
On the coils, yes, correct.
Sure.
So all our indoor unit types, whether it's a cassette, high walls, horizontal ducted, floor units, they all have built-in leak sensors, just to make sure that if you ever do cross that 4 pound limit, you're not gonna go over the minimum area mitigation requirements. So then you'll be covered by that.
Oh, that's very interesting. So even for our light commercial and our VRF style, they're really the only difference they're going to see is the refrigerant detection sensor on the indoor, because it's a communicating system. So now they're not even working with any type of intermediate controls. It's just going to be built into the indoor unit.
That's correct.
Okay. Now on the smaller units, the 1-to-1s, is that going to be an accessory sensor for the 1-to-1 head if it is required to have A2L detection?
And that's the beauty of it. For 1-to-1 applications, as I mentioned, because of the factory charge and the lower additional charges required, we actually talked to a lot of. First off, we did a lot of calculations. We did our homework, right? We looked at the standard. We did all the different calculations, and we realized that for 99.9%.
It'll never happen.
You'll never need it, right? I want to say 100%, but that, that's...
We never want to say 100, because there's that one scenario and that one person that says,
it's not
by
a
the
perfect
way.
world, so I can't say that. But it does happen that we tested it. So we checked with a lot of the installers and contractors. I'll give you an example very, very quick.
Oh, yeah, please.
Let's say you have a 2-ton unit, single split, and you ran max pipe charge, and let's say you're at like 4.8 pounds. Just throwing a random number. Right. This is not exact calculations, right? So don't hold me to it. But let's say it's a high wall unit, so you have a certain height installation. Maybe you need a minimum, the standard says you might need 120 square feet. But when you talk to an installer and they're like, so where would you install a 2-ton system? And they're like, if it's a
in a 10 by 12 roof, right?
Yeah, I would never install it in something that small. 2 tons minimum is going to be 800 square feet at least. So I'm like, well, you're way above the threshold. No need to worry about it. So that has also helped with the single split products.
Okay, so those that have been concerned with A2L refrigerant detection and mitigation and those 1-to-1s, I'm not even going to see it. You're probably going to see a sticker saying that we've went from an A1 to an A2L refrigerant. Our operating pressures are going to be so close to the 410A. If you didn't know it by the model and by the boxes, it's going to feel like a standard installation. As we get into the multi-splits, it's still going to look and feel like the same installation. You're going to see some stickers on packaging. You're going to have maybe some additional instructions to look at, some room charges to verify. But even in that same scenario, we now have the refrigerant detection sensors built into the product. So whether you need it or not, It's already there.
Covered. That's
yeah.
correct.
Oh, that's fantastic. That saves so much of the confusion between product selection, because there were a lot of contractors that were concerned, oh, when we go to A2L, am I going to have to measure every single room and determine that, will I need it, will I not? It's very simple. If it's 1-to-1, you're not going to need it. If it's above that, you may or may not. Doesn't matter. It's already there for you. Oh, that's so simple. Okay. All right. That's really a very helpful aspect of this, because we have a lot of consumers that are starting to realize that a energy efficient home can actually be a very comfortable home, right? So we're starting to relook at our homes and looking at the performance. My own son's 25. They just bought their first home this last year. And the very first thing he asked me is, how can I make my home more efficient? It wasn't, what can I add to the yard? What can I repaint? Where can I remodel a room? It was, how can I make my home more efficient? And so that is somewhat of a generational change. And so as we look at the performance of residential structures, they're also seeing like rebates and incentives. And so if I'm doing a project and I have the opportunity to better fund those projects, that it really changes the game. So let's start like on the ductless side. And are we seeing incentives and rebates in these higher performing heat pumps?
Yeah, that's a excellent point. So you're absolutely right. So what we actually did is we cross-referenced most of the common rebates or tax incentives, or however they're called, from a local as well as kind of like state, federal side.
Right.
In even Canada regions, they also have a lot of low ambient heating rebates, high efficiency
No
performance
kidding.
heat pumps.
Okay.
So, for example, from the ductless side, there is here in North America, I'll use that as an example. You have the IRA, and I think Piero
Yeah.
will also talk about that. You have the 25C tax credit rebate,
Right.
So when you have these high efficiency, high SEER ratings, high HSPF2s, high, heating performances at the low ambient temperatures, you get this additional, $3,000, $4,000
Wow.
tax credit that
That
you
adds
can get
up.
on your heat pump products.
Wow.
right?
So if I was looking at a mid-grade, mid-tier product and I was comfortable with that price, I might actually be able to upgrade into a higher performance system and still maintain a similar cost point. That's a huge opportunity for consumers.
And moving towards the Canada side, you have stuff like Hydro-Quebec, you have stuff like Better Homes.
Yeah.
They actually, it's not even a tax credit. What they do is they actually send you a check.
Oh, wow.
Like you actually get cash
A
up
true
front.
rebate, yeah.
A true rebate. And the customers are like, yeah, that's,
That
I mean,
makes
you
sense.
can't,
Why would you
you
not?
can't deny that, right?
Right.
Yeah. Free money,
Yeah,
exactly. And you get a
exactly.
new unit. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't beat that. Yes.
Okay, so ductless side, a lot of opportunities. What about in the ducted realm? Because that really is a majority of the United States,
Right.
definitely most of the Midwest. We've got ducted systems that are in dire need of upgrades.
Yep.
We always preach on the show that if we can have the discussion with the homeowner about creating a tighter environment, better insulation, better windows and doors, to hopefully be able to reduce the size of our outdoor unit to get it back to the ductwork that it was probably originally designed for to begin with. And so when we look at those options for customers who are looking at high performance heat pumps, what are they looking at for incentives and rebates as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's Sam alluded to this before, but we have different buckets of incentives. Right, you have it at the federal level through the IRA, and that is a $2,000 credit that you get for using heat pumps, which you can stack. So if you have a dual fuse system and you have a high performing furnace, you can get a $600 additional to the
the furnace as
2,000.
well?
So you can, if you have a dual fuse system, you could get up to 2,600.
Sure.
So they stack up on each other.
Okay.
The other type of incentive is at the state level. You kind of mentioned this, those are the homes, and here are rebates. Those are true rebates. They're not tax credit. That's the main difference between the two.
Right.
So you do get that rebate. And one thing to note here is that it's going to depend a lot on the state. So depending on where you are, some states are going to manage it differently. Some states are not participating at all. So it depends a lot on the state where you are, the location. Correct.
Yeah.
But that's a great rebate. It's going to be income based. So people with lower incomes are going to be probably benefited by this rebate. And when you say high performing, yes, it is high performing, but a lot of our products, even in the mid-tier range, will qualify for these type of rebates and incentives.
Nice.
For example, just to give you a number, right, 16 SEER 2 is the threshold that you need to pass. I would say 80% of the product portfolio is going to meet this rebate, and is going to qualify for the tax credit. Now, you also have a lot of incentives coming from regional and local companies, like utility companies, issuing rebates and making sure that you have a high-performing product, because it's going to help with their power distribution. It's going to help with the grid. So that is an incentive that is also coming from local utility companies. And you can combine. You can combine different rebates, different incentives to maximize the amount of funds that you get for your particular project or your particular upgrade.
You bring up a very interesting point. We're actually starting to see energy co-ops that I personally would have not thought as being promoting the use of heat pumps. So I contacted a rural energy co-op in southern Indiana just to ask how they're promoting, what they're even doing with heat pumps. And I was very surprised. They were encouraging all of their customers to convert to high-performing heat pumps. And they were building an example of how high-performance heat pumps for their co-ops would be able to extend the service life and reduce their cost over long term by enabling the customer to use their own incentives, so stackable incentives, to purchase a high-performing product so that it would extend the length of the existing electrical networking grid that they had. So instead of having to update all of their line lengths within the next couple of years, if they could get most of their customers to start using high-performing equipment, they could extend that out to 8 or 10 years, reducing that co-op investment. I thought that's brilliant. Who would have ever thought about an energy co-op with some of the highest electrical rates to go, you know what, I'd like to give you an extra rebate to go with a heat pump. I thought that's quite interesting. So it shows that our industry is changing. There's consumers that are still having that challenge. There's even contractors that are having that challenge of, do I start promoting heat pumps? So do you get much feedback from contractors or in resistance and ways to overcome that resistance to change on going to ducted heat pumps?
Yeah, well, part of it is the part of lack of information. A lot of contractors don't fully understand because it's very complex, right? They don't understand the dynamics of the rebates, where the rebates are coming from, therefore they don't offer those incentives to their customers. So we're trying to do a better job of educating our contractors and distributors and customers in general to make sure it's clear to them what's available out there. And then they can use that information to sell to the homeowner and say, look, this is what's available to you. And it's a win-win, right? We win because we sell more product, but the homeowner wins because they get a higher efficiency product and they get a rebate, an incentive. So that's kind of what we're working on right now, is making sure that our customers are educated and understand all the dynamics of all the incentives that are out there available to them.
Sam, if we look at contractors who have traditionally sold and installed ducted split systems, and then are now looking at like that potential for adding ductless systems as primary sources or as supplemental sources, do you see any of the similar? Do you see contractors that are still a little hesitant to get away from their traditional one-to-one ducted system and that is the only solution? How do contractors respond? Are they starting to finally become more aware, or is it still resistance to change?
Well, I think, yes, there's obviously still some slight resistance. I will say that. One of the biggest things is, that gets pushed back from our end. Some of the feedback that I've received from a lot of our contractors is like, well, what happens if your heat pump fails, right? Do we lose our heating completely? What happens to the end user at that point?
True.
So our technology is actually developed to where not only are we we rely on the heat pump 100%. Obviously, the heat pumps can operate, but there's always some chance that something can go wrong. Our technology also offers the ability to provide some auxiliary heating and backup as well. So if there's ever an instance where a system ever fails, you have the ability to run some backup or auxiliary heat with the internal controls that our heat pumps come with. And I think that gives them the peace of mind to say, especially if end users or even if the contractor, they're more old school and they say, hey, I don't trust it. That gives them the peace of mind to say, oh, if something ever goes wrong, I'm still covered. The answer is yes. You won't have those issues.
That's a great solution.
Yes.
Yes, there is going to be change. We know that you're comfortable with something. So, by the way, we'll give you the potential to have something you're comfortable with, but at least you need to try this solution and see where it can take you.
Correct.
Because I've actually encountered in Indiana, in the Midwest, local contractors that have been family businesses that have been traditionally gas furnace air conditioning as their matchup. I recently did an interview with them on their product lineup, And in the last 2 years, they went from 20% heat pump installations to 80% heat pump installations. And their goal is to be 90% in the next year. And what they're finding is when they give the heat pump solutions to their customers and they show them what they currently have, they'll actually do a variety of lineups, including all ductless or ducted plus ductless combinations. So contractors that previously only had maybe 2 or 3 product lineups where they would show, okay, here is your entry line gas and air conditioning. Here's your mid-grade gas and air conditioning. Here's your high-end gas and air conditioning. They actually had 7 product lineups for every customer. I know it takes more time for that salesperson, that comfort advisor, to sit down with the consumer, but if we look at that and go, okay, here's where you are. Here's anywhere in between that you can be. And let's discuss how these options can provide a solution for you, because there's a heat pump. And mind you, the entry line category was a basic furnace, basic air conditioner. Tier 2 is a mid-grade furnace with a heat pump. So the only AC lineup they even offer is a very minimum grade. And so they're making sure that the consumer sees that heat pump in all of their potential selections except for the very, very base line. I thought that's absolutely the way we should be addressing this, is not that a heat pump is an upgrade. It is, if you're looking for the bare minimum, we can do AC. Otherwise, the standard is actually heat pump. And so I've seen contractors have that resistance. I'm grateful that we're providing them with solutions. If we're wanting to learn more about products for Hitachi as well as the Johnson Controls lineup, where are the best places that we can look for more information?
So I think in general, right, from my knowledge, we do have public information available rarely right now to everybody. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to do anything. It's really available to something called Solutions Navigator.
Okay.
So all our product literature, whether it's your submittals, your specs, your technical catalogs, engineering manuals, installation manuals, operation manuals, you name it. I can just keep going down the list. There. It's everything fully, readily available just for anyone, whether it's an end user, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a distributor or a rep. They have it all there, just to their access.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say for ducted systems, same application.
Oh, wow.
We have all the information of all of our ducted systems. In addition to that, we also have the Ducted Solutions app, where they can find very similar information, but they can also find the calculator for the new A2L refrigerants, where they can use it for their applications and figure out whether they need a refrigerant detection system or not. Sure. So there's a lot more information there as well, but that's another avenue where they can go and access all of our product information. Okay. And obviously online as well for homeowners. You can go and check JCI. We have you can go in through the menus and find our residential products there as well. We have a lot of information that is more consumer facing. Exactly.
Very cool. All right, so we're grateful to spend time with Johnson Controls and Hitachi. And gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.